Quick context before we get into this. Dehancer actually reached out and asked if I'd be open to making a video, and the one thing they were really clear about was that they wanted an honest review, not a sales or hype video, and no, this isn't sponsored. Like I said, this is an honest review. I've been using Dehancer in my own projects, forming my own opinions, and figuring out where it does and doesn't fit into my workflow. And I want to talk through that. What works, what doesn't, and who I actually think this makes sense for. At its core, Dehancer is a film-like color grading plugin. It's not a LUT pack, and it's really not meant to be a one-click fix. It's built to emulate film behavior, things like color, response, grain, bloom, and halation, the things that give film its character. And the important thing is, it's not just about the look. It's about how the image responds when you push it. That's the part that separates it from a lot of other tools. On a similar note of tools, Dehancer gave me access to their new desktop beta, which is essentially the same as what I'll show in the tutorial, but in a whole application. I didn't do a lot of deep experimenting with it this time around, but the UI itself was pretty simple when I opened it up. It is kind of similar to Lightroom in a way. It mainly is a place to be able to put film emulation and tweak it, which I thought was pretty interesting. Honestly, it did feel like it was part of a longer process, especially if you edit photos in Lightroom beforehand and then take it over to Dehancer Desktop. It all just seems like more steps than just using a seat from Dehancer to be an actual Lightroom plugin. Instead of talking about it and going over all the boring details with little to no B-roll, I want to show you how I actually get the film color grade in my videos. Also, just wanted to say that all the B-roll in this is video I took of my brother-in-law's band, Caleb Itilli. He also does YouTube geared toward music gear and music production. I'll leave a link on the screen or description somewhere for you to be able to go check him out. So, when you first put Dehancer on your footage, this is what you're going to see, the Dehancer Pro V7. Starting out is the input section of Dehancer Pro. You could usually go to the source here and click choose camera, and then the vendor would be Sony, and then pick your camera, whichever one it may be. So I'm shooting on the A7 IV, and then the format would be probably S-Log3, one of these two, or S-Log2 obviously. And I don't use these because I usually am shooting on S-Cinetone, so we're not really going to worry about this section at the moment. Next is the film portion. Now I didn't do this for the footage just because I wanted to do my own color grade and use certain effects from Dehancer like bloom and halation, but this is where you find all of those film profiles like we were talking about earlier. Their catalog has a pretty nice selection, and I usually like going for the Kodak Color Plus 200 or the Kodak Portra 160 or the Fuji Color 100. Just some different ones that I really like the look of. And there's also a push and pull slider that emulates adjusting that film too, and it really helps to dial in that certain look that you're wanting to get. Next, we're going to go to Film Developer and Film Compression. Film Developer is there to help get a soft contrast and more depth look, and Film Compression is there to soften the highlights and shadows so your image can look more natural. Now we're going to go ahead and skip Expand, and we're going to head on down to Print. Print is the final stage of an actual film process. After the image is captured on the negative, it's printed, and that step shapes the final contrast and tone. And that's what it's doing here on our image. The print section is controlling how the image is ultimately displayed. As you can see, I have the Fujifilm print film effect on and tweaked to how I like it, and the difference is pretty crazy. And now we're going to go ahead and jump down and kind of gather some together. So film grain, halation, and bloom. Those three are some, in my opinion, of the most sought out effects that you can get in a film emulation plugin. I like to keep it at 65mm ISO 50, just because it's just enough texture without going crazy on the opposite end. If you add 8mm texture at ISO 50, you can see how much grain is in there in that whole frame, and to me it's just a little too much. So we're going to go ahead and put that back on 65mm ISO 50. Halation is what adds that red highlight around some of your subjects, and especially if you have a lot of bokeh in your shot, it's enough to give that film look. Let me go ahead and show you here. So I have it at 35mm, super 35, and if we go ahead and if we up it to 8mm, you can see in her face and in his face that red highlighted area is just becoming more and more. So 35 is kind of right where I like to keep it. And next up is bloom, something I've sought after for a while. Dehancer's bloom is pretty good. It adds that nice glow effect to different highlighted situations in your shot and makes it look almost dreamy. There are also a few of the other effects that I won't get into just yet in this tutorial, but are pretty worthwhile. They have film damage, film breath, gate weave, overscan, vignette, monitor, output, and LUT generator. These are things that I haven't jumped to fully, but want to come back soon and maybe make another video on how they've affected my footage. One of my personal favorites in this plugin is overscan. Overscan has built-in borders or frame overlays from film, which are super cool. You don't have to go build your own anymore, and I've done a couple projects myself back when I did sports videography, and I manually made what I called my own film frame overlay, and it took me forever. Being able to slap that on my footage now when it feels called for like this is pretty huge. Alright, that's enough of me talking about this tutorial. Now let's get back to the review. What really works well in Dehancer, and it surprised me, was how organic it feels. The grain doesn't feel pasted on, and the contrast doesn't feel super aggressive. When you move things around, it reacts more like film than a digital effect. It rewards subtly. When you slow down and make small adjustments, the image starts to feel less processed, and that's pretty cool. I feel like I've used film applications and plugins before and have tried to replicate that film look, and it just made what I was working on look terrible. With that said, this isn't a fast plugin. If you're looking for something you can throw on your footage, export, and move on, this probably isn't for you. Well, I mean you could, but there's so much more to it than just slapping a film emulation on and calling it good. Dehancer assumes you care about color. It assumes you're willing to sit with your image just a little bit longer. And for some projects, even for myself at times, that's just not realistic. I would also go to say that the price is another place that may scare some people off. The price for the monthly and annual plans range in variety, while the pay once lifetime plan is, well, quite a bit. However, if you decide it is the right tool for you, I do have a code on screen, LHAST, that gets you 10% off at checkout. It helps support the channel, but mostly I just want to make sure you save some money if you're going to invest in this. And that's what it is an investment. I think Dehancer makes the most sense for people who genuinely enjoy the grading process. If you like dialing things in with a ton of sliders, custom sliders, experimenting and shaping your image, it's really satisfying and rewarding. It feels less like you're applying a look and more like you're building one over time. It works best if you already have some idea of what you want your footage to feel like. Not in a technical sense, and more of an emotional one. You can tell when an image feels too clean or a little flat, and you want to push it somewhere more intentional. If you're more focused on speed, consistency, and getting in and out quickly, it might feel more than you need. Sometimes you just want the image to be clean and finished without spending any extra time thinking about it. And neither of those approaches is wrong. It really just depends on how you like to work and how you like your images to look. For me, this comes back to something I talk about a lot. Tools don't make the work better, they just make the process either easier or more enjoyable. Dehancer isn't something I'd use on every project. But when the goal is to slow down and really give flavor to the image, you can bet on me pulling it out. Use the tools that make you want to keep shooting, keep editing, and keep caring about the work. If you've used Dehancer, I'm curious how it fits into your workflow, or if you've bounced away from it completely. Either way, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.